Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at what happens when a peace deal doesn't just fail, it literally explodes. We're going to unpack the really dramatic collapse of this high-stakes agreement between Thailand and Cambodia and figure out how it all devolved into open conflict.
So picture this. It's December 8th, 2025. You have this big peace agreement, right? One that was personally pushed by a U.S. president, designed to end a really bloody border war. And then it's just completely shattered by the sound of fighter jets and artillery fire, just like that.
So you have to ask, right? How does a celebrated peace deal unravel into airstrikes in just a matter of weeks? I mean, what happened? To really get it, we need to peel back the layers here, starting with the one incident that basically lit the fuse.
Okay, so on that Monday morning, Thailand launches these air and artillery strikes all along this disputed border. And let's be clear, this was not just some minor skirmish. No, this was the most serious escalation of violence between these two countries in over a decade.
And in the immediate aftermath, and this happens a lot in these situations, both countries offered up completely different stories. I mean, totally irreconcilable accounts of who actually fired that first shot.
I mean, look at this. You've got two completely opposing realities. Thailand is saying, hey, our actions were defensive, we were responding after one of our soldiers was killed. But Cambodia? They're describing a totally unprovoked attack, reporting 4 civilian deaths and insisting their troops held their fire. This is pretty much the fog of war playing out in real time.
But while all this political back and forth was happening, the human cost was just staggering. Thai authorities ended up evacuating over 385,000 civilians from 4 different border provinces. That number, it really grounds this conflict. It's not just about politics, it's about the massive disruption and real danger that ordinary people were suddenly facing.
And that staggering human cost, well, it's the direct result of a promise being broken. See, this violence didn't just come out of nowhere. It erupted from the collapse of a very high-profile, but, as it turns out, deeply fragile peace deal.
You have to remember, just 2 months earlier, back in October of 2025, this ceasefire was the talk of the town. It was brokered by the U.S. and Malaysia, signed with all this fanfare. It was being called a huge diplomatic achievement, a real sign that even the most bitter conflicts could be resolved.
And this timeline, wow. It really shows you just how fast all of that optimism just evaporated. So in July, you have a brutal 5-day war. Then in October, this celebrated peace deal. But by November, it's already on life support. And then, less than 2 months after it was signed, it's over. Done.
And right here, this is the crucial insight into why it all fell apart. These kinds of quick-fix deals, they often serve a short-term political purpose, right? They generate good headlines, they give the appearance of success. But as analysts pointed out, this deal was basically just a bandage on a really deep wound. Yeah, it stopped the immediate shooting, but it never even touched the century-old disputes that were festering underneath. And, well, it didn't take long for that wound to start bleeding again.
Okay, so to really truly understand why this conflict is so persistent, and frankly, why that peace deal was probably doomed from the start, we have to go back in time. And I mean way back, more than 100 years actually.
It all comes back to this, the 1907 Franco-Siamese Treaty. This was a border map created when Cambodia was under French colonial rule. And here's the problem. Thailand has always argued that this map is flawed, that it's unfair. So this one document, you could say it's the original sin of the entire conflict. It has fueled mistrust and violence for generations. And that old treaty created this whole series of flashpoints that have just never been resolved. We're talking about a 500-mile border that isn't even fully marked out. You've got competing claims over these ancient sacred temples. And then there's a big international court ruling from way back in 1962 that gave the key temple, Preah Vihear, to Cambodia. A decision, by the way, that Thailand has never really fully accepted.
And this really gets to the absolute heart of the deadlock. See, Cambodia points to international law. They say, look, the International Court of Justice has ruled in our favor, case closed. But Thailand just rejects that and keeps pushing for direct negotiations. It's like they're operating from 2 completely different playbooks.
So that brings us all the way back to today, into the really tough question of where things go from here, especially now that the latest attempt at peace has failed so spectacularly. And this is where you see the vicious cycle in action. A border incident happens, and it gets fanned by all this nationalist rhetoric on both sides. That, in turn, puts immense pressure on the political leaders to look tough, to not back down. And in that kind of environment, compromise, well, it starts to look a lot like weakness. It makes de-escalation almost impossible.
So the collapse of this ceasefire is really just a stark reminder of a hard truth. You can't just put a conflict on pause.
Lasting peace means actually confronting the ghosts of the past, the old colonial maps, the sacred temples, the deep-seated national pride. With domestic politics on both sides basically rewarding a tough stance over compromise, the path forward is incredibly narrow, isn't it? It suggests that any future peace process won't just need international mediators, it's going to need a fundamental shift in how leaders can sell compromise to their own people. Until then, the huge question remains, what will it finally take to draw a line in the sand that both of these nations can actually accept?